The sky over the valley was painted in shades of fire and gold as the sun sank behind the pine-covered ridges. The air carried the faint hum of crickets and the soft scent of rain lingering from an afternoon drizzle. It was peaceful, the kind of evening that only belonged to people who had fought hard to earn their peace. Michael Hale sat on the porch of his ranch house, a chipped mug of coffee in his hand, watching the orange horizon melt into deep indigo. His eyes, sharp and still carrying that distant military vigilance, scanned the tree line out of habit. Even after 6 months of civilian life, the instinct of a Navy SEAL never left. Every rustle, every distant sound of gravel crunching still triggered a small pulse of readiness inside him. His wife, Claire, appeared in the doorway behind him, her soft voice breaking the quiet. "You still doing your sunset watch, soldier?" she teased, setting down a plate of cornbread and roast chicken on the porch table. Michael chuckled, that deep, rare laugh that only Claire could draw out of him. Old habits die hard, sweetheart. The world feels different when you've been where I've been. She leaned against the porch post beside him, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Well, the world here is a lot quieter," she said with a gentle smile. "At least it was supposed to be." Michael's jaw tightened a little at that. He knew what she meant. The HOA, the Homeowners Association that governed the nearby gated community, had been a constant thorn in their side since they'd bought the property just outside its limits. Their land wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, but the president, Nancy Porter, refused to accept that. She'd sent letters, warnings, even inspectors claiming Michael's new fence violated neighborhood aesthetics. Michael had laughed the first few times. "Let her bark," he told Claire. "She's just drunk on power." But over the weeks, the tone changed. Nancy started showing up in person, always with a clipboard, fake smile, and 2 men in polo shirts standing behind her like bodyguards. "I'm warning you, Mr. Hale," she'd said one hot afternoon, standing at the edge of his driveway. "This property visibly affects the uniformity of our neighborhood." "We're within our rights to enforce compliance," Michael had just stared at her, calm but cold. "You're out of your jurisdiction, ma'am. I've fought real wars. You don't want to start one on my land?" Nancy's fake composure cracked for just a second. "You'll regret this," she hissed before stomping off. Claire had tried to reason with her, tried to keep peace, but Nancy wasn't the kind of person who understood reason. She understood control, and when she couldn't get it, she lashed out. A few days later, strange things began happening. A car parked across the road for hours, lights off. Someone left a threatening note in their mailbox, unsigned. One night, their security cameras caught men walking along their fence line, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Michael studied the footage closely, their stance, their movement. He knew immediately they weren't real cops. They were pretending to be. "I think Nancy's hired some private goons," Michael muttered to Claire. "They're amateurs, but they're bold." "Should we call the sheriff?" she asked. "Not yet," he said. "If they cross the line, I'll handle it." That was on Wednesday. By Friday night, the storm hit. Michael had driven into town for supplies, gas, feed for the horses, and some spare parts for his generator. It was supposed to be a quick trip. Claire stayed behind to finish dinner, humming to herself as she cooked. The smell of roasted garlic filled the house, mixing with the faint crackle of the old country station on the radio. At 7:48 p.m., headlights rolled up the driveway. Claire looked out the kitchen window and frowned. She didn't recognize the vehicles. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, unmarked but suspiciously official looking. The men who stepped out wore tactical vests with cheap police patches. One of them flashed a badge, but even from the window, Claire could tell it was fake. She stepped outside cautiously. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Ma'am, we're here on an HOA enforcement order," one of them said, voice dripping with arrogance. "We've had multiple complaints about unapproved fencing and non-compliant structures. We need to conduct an inspection." Claire's instincts flared. "You're not real police. You don't have any authority here. My husband's a veteran." Before she could finish, one of the men stepped forward and shoved her. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he snapped. Claire stumbled backward, catching herself on the railing. "This property's in violation. We'll search whether you like it or not." She screamed. The sound carried through the night like a gunshot. The men kicked the door open and stormed in. Claire tried to fight back. She grabbed a lamp, swung it, and shattered it across one man's shoulder. But there were three of them. The second one hit her hard. Too hard. She fell to the floor, clutching her side as pain shot through her ribs. They tore through drawers and shelves, muttering something about evidence of illegal additions. It was nonsense. They were just there to intimidate. When they finally left, they slammed the door behind them, leaving Claire half-conscious on the floor. She managed to crawl to her phone, but before she could dial 911, her strength gave out. 15 minutes later, Michael's truck came rumbling up the drive. The first thing he saw was the open gate, then the smashed front door, then Claire, pale, shaking, trying to lift her head. "Mike!" she gasped, tears streaking her face. "They said they were HOA police. They hurt me." Michael knelt beside her, his hands trembling, not from fear but fury. He saw the bruising forming along her ribs, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "Hang on, sweetheart," he whispered. "Hang on." He grabbed his phone, about to call the sheriff, when headlights appeared again. Two SUVs pulling back into the driveway, the same ones. Michael's eyes hardened. Something cold and dangerous filled them. He rose slowly, moved to the gun safe, and punched in the code without looking. The door clicked open, revealing the matte black M4 rifle that had followed him through deployments across Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. He hadn't touched it since coming home, but tonight it felt like an old friend. He loaded a magazine with calm precision, chambered around, and took position by the window. Outside, the fake cops fanned out again, flashlights sweeping the yard. One of them laughed. "Man, her old man's not even home," one said. "We'll finish this quick." Michael's breath steadied. Every nerve in his body came alive. The battlefield instincts returned, counting steps, scanning shadows, assessing targets. The first man approached the porch with a crowbar, raising it toward the door. Michael's finger rested lightly on the trigger. The air grew so still that even the crickets stopped. "You picked the wrong house," Michael murmured, and with that, he moved like lightning, silent, precise, and deadly calm. The sound that broke the night was not a shout, not a scream. It was the sharp metallic click of Michael Hale's safety being switched off. For him, that sound was the final bridge between peace and war, between the husband and the soldier. Through the cracked window, the fake HOA cops moved clumsily across the yard, their flashlights cutting wild streaks across the barn, the porch, the side of the truck. They were laughing, taunting each other, cocky, ignorant of what waited inside that house. "Get the door open," one shouted, kicking at the splintered wood. Michael's breathing slowed. In SEAL training, they taught him how to make chaos slow down, how to turn adrenaline into focus. His eyes followed their steps one by one. Three men in black tactical vests, carrying pistols, pretending to be officers. Not professionals, thugs with a costume. He took a breath. The trigger broke under his finger. The first shot was controlled, precise. The man with the crowbar spun backward, his weapon clattering against the porch railing. The other two froze for a heartbeat, confusion flashing across their faces. Then they ducked behind their SUVs, shouting, "Shots fired! Shots fired!" One yelled into a cheap radio, his voice cracking with panic. Michael moved from window to window, keeping low, scanning their positions. They fired blindly toward the house. Wild, panicked shots that shattered a porch light and blew apart part of the doorframe. But Michael didn't flinch. He'd been shot at by trained insurgents. This was child's play compared to the storm he'd lived through overseas. Claire stirred on the couch, wincing. "Mike, what's happening?" He knelt beside her for a second, checking her breathing. "You're safe, sweetheart. Just stay down. Don't move, you hear me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, don't get yourself hurt." Michael gave her a soft smile, the same one he gave her every time he left for a mission. "I won't." Then he stood, slipping back into combat rhythm. Outside, the fake cops regrouped. One was shouting orders, trying to sound like he had authority. "Move to the left. Flank the side window." Michael smirked. "Flank this," he whispered. He dropped low, moved to the side hallway, and took aim through the broken blinds. Another clean squeeze of the trigger. and the man in the vest dropped his flashlight, falling to one knee. The beam rolled across the dirt, flickering like a dying star. The last man panicked. He dove behind the SUV, shouting into his radio again. "Officer down! Send backup! He's got a rifle!" Michael's voice cut through the night, deep and commanding. "You broke into my home. You hurt my wife. Drop your weapon and crawl out, or you're not walking away." There was silence. Then, tires screeching in the distance. More headlights appeared, cutting through the trees. Michael steadied himself. This wasn't over. 4 more vehicles pulled in. 2 more SUVs and a pickup. 8, maybe 9 men climbed out, all in similar fake uniforms. They carried shotguns, AR-15, mismatched, cheap gear that screamed amateur. They thought numbers would save them. Michael knew better. He reached for his earpiece, a leftover from his private security days, and connected it to the intercom running through his barn. "Time to wake up the cavalry," he muttered, tapping a code on his phone. From behind the barn, engines roared to life. Deep, guttural motorcycle engines, the kind that made the ground tremble. The bikers were Michael's brothers, a group of veterans and riders he'd met after retiring. Men who'd fought beside him, men who understood loyalty better than any HOA rule ever could. The Iron Hawks, as they called themselves, had a rule. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. Within minutes, 12 motorcycles stormed out of the dark, engines growling like thunder. The fake cops froze, their flashlights jerking wildly as the bikes surrounded the driveway. Headlights formed a blazing circle, trapping the intruders in white light and engine smoke. The bikers revved in rhythm, a low, ominous rumble that sent shivers through the night. Michael stepped onto the porch, rifle slung low, eyes locked on the terrified men. His boots crunched against the gravel as he walked down slowly, like a lion approaching cornered prey. "Which one of you hurt my wife?" he asked, voice calm but deadly. None of them spoke. Their fake badges glinted under the lights. Sweat rolled down one man's temple. "You came here pretending to be cops," Michael said, pacing in front of them, "but you're nothing but hired cowards. You break into a home, assault a woman, and for what? A property line? A fence?" One man finally cracked. We didn't mean to," Nancy said. Michael's head snapped toward him. "Nancy Porter?" He nodded quickly. "She said she had legal authority, that this guy was breaking HOA rules. We were just supposed to scare you." "Scare me?" Michael's voice deepened, dangerous. "You shattered my wife's ribs." The man swallowed hard. "We didn't know she'd..." "Enough." Michael raised his rifle slightly, not to shoot, but to remind them just how small they were. "Drop your weapons. All of you." They hesitated. That was their last mistake. The Iron Hawks revved their engines in unison, deafening sound echoing off the hills. One biker stepped forward, a massive man named Duke, with a beard like iron and tattoos crawling up his neck. He spat on the ground. "You heard the man. Drop him before we make you." Panic spread through the fake cops. Guns clattered to the ground. One tried to bolt toward the SUV, but before he reached it, 3 bikers blocked his path, headlights glaring in his eyes. Michael turned toward Duke. "Call the sheriff. Tell him we've got a situation. Impersonation, assault, breaking and entering." Duke grinned. "Already did. They'll be here in 5. Michael lowered his rifle, finally letting the weight of the moment sink in. His heart still pounded, but his mind was ice cold. He looked back at the house, where Claire watched from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but proud. The real deputies arrived minutes later, their red and blue lights flashing across the property. When they saw the scene, they couldn't believe it. Fake cops cuffed on the ground, surrounded by bikers and a man with an M4 slung over his shoulder. Sheriff Collins stepped out of his cruiser, his hand instinctively hovering near his holster. "Michael, what in God's name happened here?" Michael exhaled slowly, handing the rifle to Collins, safety on. "They broke in, hurt my wife, claimed they were HOA enforcement. I defended my home." Collins' eyes narrowed as he looked at the suspects. "These guys aren't local. Looks like out-of-state mercenaries. We'll sort this out." Then one of the fake cops muttered, Nancy Porter hired us. She paid cash. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. You mean the HOA president? Michael just nodded, his expression unreadable. Collins looked at him. You want to press charges? Michael's eyes flicked to his wife, then back to the sheriff. His voice was low, steady. I want them prosecuted for every second of pain they caused her. The sheriff nodded. You got it. As the fake cops were loaded into patrol cars, the bikers dispersed quietly, engines fading into the distance. The night was still again, but it was a different kind of silence now, a heavier one. Michael walked back to the porch where Claire waited. She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. It's over? He looked out at the flashing lights disappearing down the road. For them? Not yet, but for us. Yeah, it's over. He pulled her close, careful of her ribs, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe. The morning after the attack felt heavy, like the air itself carried the weight of what had happened. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the shattered glass, the broken door, and the bruises on Claire's ribs. The ranch that once symbolized peace now looked like a war zone. Michael stood outside as the sun broke over the horizon, its first light glinting off the spent shell casings scattered across the porch. He didn't speak. He didn't move. His jaw was tight, his eyes distant. The same look he had worn after combat missions overseas. Only this time, the battlefield was home. Sheriff Collins' SUV rumbled back up the driveway, dust trailing behind it. He stepped out with a clipboard in hand and a grim expression. Morning, Michael. I thought you'd be gone to the hospital by now. Claire's resting inside, Michael said quietly, voice hoarse from a sleepless night. She's bruised bad, but she'll live. The doctor said 2 ribs cracked, one close to puncturing her lung. His fists clenched unconsciously. Collins nodded, sympathy flickering in his eyes. She's lucky. You both are. Michael's eyes turned cold. Luck had nothing to do with it. The sheriff sighed. I know. He flipped open his notes. We interrogated those men you caught last night. They're not real law enforcement, not even licensed security. They're former bouncers and muscle-for-hire types from 3 counties over. Every one of them said the same thing. They were hired by Nancy Porter. Michael's jaw flexed, a dark fire lighting behind his eyes. How much did she pay them? 10 grand cash. She told them you were a violent veteran building illegal structures and threatening neighbors. She claimed you were armed and unstable, and that they were authorized to subdue you if necessary. Michael stared at the horizon. She weaponized lies. She sent thugs to attack a woman in her own home. Collins nodded. We've got enough to arrest her. Assault by proxy, conspiracy, impersonation of law enforcement, and breaking and entering. She'll do time. Michael's voice was low but sharp. I want to see it happen. By afternoon, news vans had gathered outside the HOA's pristine gates. Nancy Porter's luxury SUV sat parked in her driveway, the picture of entitlement. She stood in front of her porch, wearing pearls and sunglasses, lecturing 2 real deputies about legal misunderstandings. When Michael arrived with Sheriff Collins, the entire neighborhood came out to watch. Homeowners peeked through blinds, murmuring to each other. Everyone had heard about the chaos at the Hale Ranch. Everyone wanted to see what happened next. Nancy turned as Collins approached, plastering on a smug smile. Sheriff, I'm glad you're here. There's been some terrible confusion. That man, she pointed sharply at Michael, is an unstable ex-soldier who... Save it, Nancy, Collins cut her off. He held up a warrant. We have sworn statements from 9 men who say you hired them to impersonate police officers and assault a civilian. You're under arrest for conspiracy, impersonation, and aggravated assault. Nancy froze, her fake confidence cracking. That's absurd. I was trying to protect the community. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the weight of thunder. You sent men to my house. They broke my door, attacked my wife, and called themselves cops. You think that's protecting anyone? Nancy's tone faltered. I didn't tell them to hurt anyone. They were supposed to scare you. Just scare you enough to move your fence. Michael took one more step closer. You tried to scare a Navy SEAL, Nancy, and you almost killed my wife. For the first time, her face drained of color. Collins motioned to his deputies. "Cuff her." As they led Nancy away, she turned one last time toward Michael, eyes filled with venom. "You think this makes you a hero? You'll regret humiliating me like this." Michael didn't even blink. "I've faced worse threats than you." The handcuffs clicked. The crowd of onlookers fell silent as the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA was escorted to the patrol car.